When we get into change management, a lot of it has to be a pause point because we can actually burn people out during the transition from old software to new software, from changing roles in leadership team, from our favorite person retiring. Even good transitions can be seen as negative when we're not allowing space and pause points to really address what does this change mean and allowing people through that change curve with support. So let's talk about navigating change like a pro. And really, if it's personal or organizational in a company, it can create uncertainty and stress when it's not managed well and we're not giving time and focus to it. To assume that people will just go with the flow is leaving your team behind. And I've seen that because I can change with ease and I can go with the flow a lot easier than most work styles, that I would leave people behind. That I would just assume that they were on board because they weren't saying anything, or because we had that meeting that everyone knows what's going on, when you really have to reiterate it over and over again for it finally to sink in. So when we mismanage change and avoid the transition, that people are just used to change by now, I've heard that one many times, people are used to change by now, you can create disengagement, right? People are going to start checking out. Yeah, I'll go with the flow, but I'm not really involved, which means they're going to produce less. It's going to decrease morale and that trust because they didn't really have any buy-in or say in it. And then eventually it's going to decrease the energy of the team because you don't have trust, good communication. Not everyone's on board. And so you're just dragging people along. And that's de-energizing not only for the team, but the leader that has to make the change. So it's similar to like a rickety bridge, right? So a lot of my content and workforce theme is around adventures in the woods, using a core compass for workforce energy management and really just going on this journey and adventure together. So let's take a picture of this, right? So you get to a checkpoint and you have to change, and change is on the other side of this rickety bridge, right? So we're really unsure, is this bridge just gonna hold? How many people can we get across the bridge at once before it collapses, if it does? What is the stability of this bridge as you go through it, right? Is it gonna sway? Is there wind? What external forces are in play that we can't control? So think of that. I have to get to point B across this rickety bridge. You need a steady hand, clarity, communication with the team to cross this bridge to make it to the other side. If you just do it and assume everyone else behind you is going to do what you do, it's going to fail, right? Someone's going to do something across the bridge, or you're going to get too many people on the bridge and it's going to collapse. So really getting everyone on board and aligned with what the plan is, getting everyone's feedback, because someone might see something that you don't. That's why we have all different minds in play when we talk about innovation and creativity. And then we talk through, how does this look? And then we can even talk about plan B. If something goes wrong and we have a couple people that are on the bridge right now, what's plan B? Right? What's plan B so everyone's on board and doesn't panic? Do you see how crossing this rickety bridge to the point B looks a little less tedious, a little less challenging? The circumstances have not changed, but now we have a cohesive plan. Everyone's on board. We have communicated it. We have a plan B if something goes wrong, and we will communicate as we go through the bridge. It doesn't seem as scary. It seems like a little exciting. It seems like a little bit more adventurous to take on. That is very similar to change management in an organization, whether you're doing software, process, product, or people changes. We have to figure out the clarity and vision of where we're going, communicate it out, increase that trust where everyone's involved, and then find a flow as we go through it, those nice checkpoints, pulse points to check in often, that people aren't afraid to go across that rickety bridge to the point B, that they're on board with the next adventure. Now, a few steps that I want you to consider when you're guiding people through this change, when you're guiding them through this rickety bridge to point B, is to normalize uncertainty, to not push it under the rug. That's toxic positivity, that we need to do this and everyone's on board and let's do this, gang. Oftentimes in change in my organization, I would hear, we just need to get through the month. We just need to get to next quarter. Well, guess what happens after that next quarter? We just need to get through the next quarter. It's not super energizing or motivating. It's actually very depleting, and kind of puts you in this helplessness, hopelessness, despair state. So normalize uncertainty. Hey, we see what we see, and there might be some unknowns here. We see this rickety bridge, but we're not sure how strong the wood is. We're not sure how strong the rope is across. So address the uncertainty that we already know so that we can start to talk about the plan Bs. We can start to talk about other solutions or options that might be available. And acknowledging this discomfort is part of the growth, and it actually like helps people collaborate and connect, because we're discussing the uncertainty. And there's certain work styles that don't like risk. They don't like inconsistencies. So it also acknowledges their concerns with the risk. The step 2 then is to clarify the why we need to get to point B, right? And that might be the dysfunction in your operation, dysfunction in the product process or people. And defining that purpose behind it really drives them forward to seeing what it could be, right? At point B, how better it will be for the team when we get through that. So purpose behind that change will really anchor the team around the mission. Step 3 then is to break it down. All right. So focusing on small manageable steps through the process instead of overwhelming them with this whole giant gamut and big picture moment that a lot of people actually have a hard time imagining, especially when you're in the day-to-day in the organization, right? So I take an organization outside of its brick and mortar walls, and we dream and break down to small steps. But when I see them in their conference rooms, in their organizations, you can see like some of that dream is depleted. Some of the light that they had of envisioning the future is gone. And it's because it gets stuck in the day-to-day again. So breaking it down to small, manageable steps will inspire that change while still focused on the big picture, right? We still need to get to point B, but there's a few steps that we need to take. So possible hurdles that you might run into is resistance of others. So go check out the stakeholder analysis in the change management playlist. It really goes through plotting different people through change, so you can use them to enhance support around the change. You can also communicate in smaller groups the ones that are resisting it. So go check out that video that digs into stakeholders a little bit more when they might be feeling loss of control or discomfort. And then you may experience groups that have burnout because there's too much change going on, which is the importance of step 1 of acknowledging uncertainty versus, pop-up uncertainties that were very predictable. So creating a conversation around it and discussion around it will allow for more healthy discussion and actually increase that psychological safety that I talk about a lot in programs, which goes into burnout and survivorship mode and distrust and miscommunication. When we increase that, right, we're talking about the unknowns, the uncertainty. We're increasing that psychological safety that, yeah, me too. Yeah, I think that too, right? You're connecting people. So supportive measures when you're guiding people through these 3 steps of normalizing the uncertainty and clarifying the why forward and breaking it down to little bitty steps is practicing that self-compassion, which means you do need time and space for change and conversations. Because if I want to do a flyby pass and someone actually has a legit question about this change and I don't have time for it, I don't have time for this discussion, you're just backing them into a corner to say, no thanks, resist the change. So creating time around change management is going to be important, especially for leaders. All right, because there's people watching them. And so if they're disgruntled with the process, if they're being rushed through the process, if they don't have time to talk with their team members about the change, they're getting frustrated and the team is seeing it. The other thing is to lean into those trusted relationships identified in that stakeholder analysis because they're on board with the change. So you don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to always be the bad guy or the messenger. I was often that in HR. I was always the messenger out to the workforce, and sometimes I had nothing to do with the change. I really needed those trusted relationships to back me up and explain how it affects their department, their specific positions, and get the team on board. And then as we go through those little steps, can you celebrate the milestones, no matter how small? And laugh about even the missteps and the failures, right? Bring some humor in it. When you're on a trail and like someone steps in the mud or their shoe falls off or they got like a bug on them and they're freaking out, it's funny, right? It's a funny moment in which is low risk, right? And we can bring humor and humility to change, because it is an adventure. And let's be real, when we get to point B, we don't remember, right? We're celebrating point B, but that's not the highlight. The highlight's what happened on the bridge, right? The shaky moments where Tony Tim is screaming, or Susie almost lost her lunch because she's afraid of heights, right? It's the funny moments and the pitfalls and the hurdles on the bridge, right? The journey, the adventure that we remember, not the point B. So when we can create space to prepare our communications and space to have these conversations, we can avoid burnout during transitions. And in an ever-changing world, this is going to be more important than ever. Through these couple steps, you can navigate change like a pro.